When you think of superstars who've wasted away their best years on a horrible team, a lot of players come to mind. The best example of a player I can think of who I watched growing up was Kevin Garnett. He spent many years carrying a horrendous Timberwolves team to the playoffs, and it wasn't until his 8th playoff appearance when his team finally made it out of the first round. However, in modern times, I don't think there's been any other superstar in the league carrying his team as hard as Damian Lillard. And yet, despite his incredible individual success playing the greatest basketball of his career at the age of 32, the Portland Trail Blazers are once again barely scraping by, between the bottom of the playoffs and the draft lottery, where they usually are. How's it going, folks? My name's Andy, and today it's about time to give Damian Lillard his due. But how come he's in this situation? The Blazers had so much time to put together a competent squad around Dame, yet this is all they can do? Anyway, let's get started. First, everyone must understand that Dame got drafted into a phenomenal situation. In the aftermath of the Brandon Roy era, the Blazers entered a rebuild. When Lillard was drafted in 2012, he came off an incredible 3 seasons at Weber State. And despite previously being just a 2-star athlete, barely even recruited, barely even considered a top 100 player in the nation, his play at Weber State skyrocketed his draft stock. Lillard got picked by the Blazers at number 6, a huge accomplishment considering where he started. Now, he joined a team that just started their rebuild, but they already had a handful of quality young players who quickly developed. Familiar names you've all heard of: Wesley Matthews, Nick Batum, Robin Lopez, and of course, their all-star, LaMarcus Aldridge. The thing is, right when Dame joined the team, it was clear in his rookie season he was bound to be the secondary star of this franchise. I say secondary because he played his first few years under the shadow of Aldridge. But those first few seasons in the NBA happened to be the best rosters he's ever played with. Of course, Lillard wasn't the same player he was back then, but he still had that same mentality. In his sophomore year, he captured the attention of the entire world in the playoffs against the Houston Rockets. While it was Aldridge who was the MVP of that series, Lillard's performance was the one we'll remember. Game 6, Portland was up 3-2 on their home floor. They were down 2 points with less than a second left, and had they lost this game, they'd be going back to Houston for Game 7, and there was a high possibility they would lose the series. Momentum was on the Rockets' side as they were climbing back from being down 3-1, so if the Blazers didn't win this game, they would have been in trouble. That's when it happened. A game-winning, series-winning buzzer beater. Not only did Lillard stamp his name in the history books forever, but it was the Blazers' first playoff series victory in 14 years. Eventually, they would lose to the Spurs in the second round, but I think it was this moment when everyone realized, no, it wasn't Aldridge who was going to be the face of the franchise. It was Lillard. Unfortunately, even though this young Blazers team was poised for success and had so much room to grow, things fell apart rather quickly. They had another 50-plus win season after this, but a myriad of issues, including injuries, tense contract negotiations, and even a lack of camaraderie, caused this team to split apart. Lillard has mentioned before that his relationship with Aldridge was, well, it barely existed. Years after Aldridge left the team, Lillard was asked about this in an interview. He said, quote, "I wish it was like more of a brotherhood, more of a line of communication with me as a young player and him as an all-star. It wasn't his personality to reach out, but as a younger player, I came into the league wishing and thinking he was going to take me under his wing, like his little bro. I had confidence in myself, but I wanted him to be like, man, let's go eat. You are going to be good, you are going to be an all-star. I wanted him to talk to me like that, but he didn't." There might have been some jealousy involved too. Reportedly, Aldridge was kinda jealous of Lillard. He was in the prime of his career right when Dame entered the NBA, and in a few short years, he became more beloved in Portland than Aldridge ever was. Either way, by 2015, the post-Aldridge era now commenced, and the era of Damian Lillard began. With Lillard as the de facto face of the franchise, the Blazers took a while to develop the players to support him. With a new-look roster that included guys like CJ McCollum, Yusuf Nurkic, Al-Farouq Aminu, plus a bunch of role players that came and went. Even with Dame putting up superstar caliber numbers, they would routinely get bounced early in the playoffs. There were a lot of problems with the Blazers rosters throughout the years, and it was a combination of factors that led them to never successfully building a championship team. The issue started with their draft selections. From 2015 until 2022, the Blazers only had 2 draft selections within the lottery: Zach Collins in 2017 and Shaedon Sharpe in 2022. Actually, Collins wasn't even their selection, but the Blazers traded for him on draft night. He spent a few years as a decent backup big man for the team, but never really improved in his time there. Also, he got derailed by foot injuries. Shaedon Sharpe was a recent selection, so it's gonna be a while till he becomes a valuable contributor. By the time he does, Dame will probably be on the downswing of his career. The only player they drafted who is currently a major piece of the team is Anthony Simons. Simons was a late first-round pick, the 24th pick of the 2018 draft, and he's the only guy in that time frame who actually panned out. However, I don't think this is the fault of the organization. The Blazers were rarely ever in the lottery since Dame got drafted, cause when they were bad, they were still hovering around the middle of the pack. They were never in the position to tank, so their picks were never that high. This kinda reminds me of what Sam Hinkie said a long time ago. With the NBA's lottery system, the best option to rebuild is to tank. Simply by having Lillard, their teams were never bad enough to be at the bottom of the standings. And their only horrendous year was in 2021-22, and that's cause he got injured. Anyway, by the late 2010s, the Blazers were primarily led by Dame and CJ. The issue was, they were arguably the worst defensive backcourt in the entire NBA. And even if they weren't, they were for sure the worst defensive backcourt among all playoff teams. The Blazers routinely were in the bottom half of defensive rating. They were also missing a competent two-way wing player. It was a huge void in their roster for so many years, ever since Wes Matthews and Nick Batum left the team. And considering how important having two-way wing players are, it's a huge disadvantage to be weak at those positions. Not to mention, their front court wasn't exactly popping off either. To make matters worse, during the Dame and CJ era, the Blazers had difficulty attracting free agents, which led to them overpaying for players that just weren't worth much at all. For example, this is their payroll for the 2017-18 season. You had Evan Turner making $17 million a year. They signed him the year prior for 4 years, $70 million, one of the worst contracts in recent memory. Mo Harkless's contract was pretty bad too. They wanted him to develop into that two-way wing player they were missing, but he regressed shortly after signing that deal. Then you had Myers Leonard, who was injured for basically the entire year. Al-Farouq Aminu was literally their best wing player. All these guys were overpaid and played too many minutes for what they produced. Their backcourt, which normally gives them an advantage over most teams, got suffocated during playoff time. This season culminated with an embarrassing sweep by the Pelicans in the first round, despite the fact that they were heavily favored to win the series. The year after that was the best season of the Lillard era. They won 53 games and reached the conference finals. Unfortunately, they had some major health issues too. Jusuf Nurkic had a career season, but he was injured for the entire playoffs. They were still able to get past Jokic and the Nuggets in the semis without him, despite very few people thinking they'd win that series. That's another problem that the Blazers were forced to overcome. Nurkic has been in Portland since 2017, yet it feels like he's been injured for half that time. He's missed so many playoff games, he's missed almost an entire season. The Blazers still re-signed him because honestly, he's been solid when he plays, and it's not like any other major free agents considered going to Portland. Despite the struggles of the organization to build a team around Lillard, I feel like most of this isn't their fault. Sure, Lillard could do some more recruiting, but that's not his job. The front office could try to attract free agents, but it doesn't always work like that. Portland is not exactly a free agent destination. They don't make many trades either. And when they do, it's usually a minor one, or one with the purpose of cutting salary. The CJ McCollum deal was essentially made because they didn't want to re-sign him to a massive deal. It's been a common theme with the organization. Oh, I'm sure the fans know about it. Over the years, they've tried so hard to stay below the luxury tax. It was actually a topic of conversation between Lillard and the front office. He's been born and bred on loyalty, but the team's commitment to build around him has been put into question. Simply because they won't go above the luxury tax threshold. preferring to cut players instead or make non-ideal trades just to get under it. However, even this, I wouldn't say is completely the team's fault either. In this day and age, if you're not in contention for the title, then there's no point in going into the luxury tax. In the 2022-23 season, only 9 teams are in the luxury tax. If you take a look at these teams, all of them fall under 2 categories. They're contending for the title, so the owners went all in. Or 2, they have absurdly rich owners who don't give a crap about the tax. The only team of these 9 that doesn't fit into either of these categories is probably the Mavs. I don't think they're a real contender, but they did make an effort to go all in anyway. They got a huge tax bill, but credit to Mark Cuban for at least trying to build around Luka. But yeah, you see what I mean, right? For a mediocre team like the Blazers, they aren't going into the tax for Dame. On the plus side, the trade they've made to acquire Jeremy Grant was the best trade they've made in a long time. He is exactly what the Blazers were missing for so many years. A two-way wing player who can put the ball into the basket, and he's putting up all-star caliber numbers. At least with this trade, we know the Blazers are making some sort of effort to support Lillard, in his hopes of winning a championship in Portland. And with the development of Simons, he's already good enough to replace McCollum. One thing's for sure, I don't think Dame will ever leave Portland. I wouldn't blame him if he does leave to go after a ring, cause from the looks of it, it's not happening in Portland. Even with the greatest season of his career, heck, one of the greatest seasons in history by an individual player, this team needs so much more to contend. Anyway, that's all folks. Let me know your thoughts on Dame and the Blazers' current situation. Let me know in the comments. Thank you all so much for watching. I hope you all enjoyed the video, and of course, as always, I'll see you next time. Peace.